Then we went into December. My favourite place again, not. And recent legislative actions in New York, as well as proposed new ones to remove any exemptions to vaccines and mandate that all children must be vaccinated. And the idea of New York becoming a vaccine police state is no longer a theory or a warning. It's happening in full public view thanks to what one lawmaker refers to as the corruption in Albany. A new proposed bill in New York would mandate the HPV Gardasil vaccine as a requirement for school attendance, both private and public, including daycare. Parents who no longer can enrol their children in schools, whether public or private, due to the loss of religious and medical exemptions to vaccines, are now apparently turning to homeschool teaching as their only option left to teach their children. Smart move. But a lawmaker, and Assemblyman David DiPietro, has stated that lawmakers are planning on outlawing homeschooling altogether because they want to be able to vaccinate the children in the schools without parent approval or knowledge. I'll repeat that again so it sinks in. They're going to outlaw homeschooling because they want to be able to vaccinate the children in the schools without parental approval or knowledge. One of the possible new state laws set to take effect in January would require kids born on or after January the 1st, 2009, who are entering public schools or daycares to receive the HPV vaccine. Now, due to the possibility of the passing of this bill, it is said that many parents have turned to homeschooling, and East Aurora has reportedly seen a 56% rise in homeschooling in 2019. However, DiPietro said Albany is working with state education to outlaw homeschooling, and he said even if it's unconstitutional, legislators don't care about the legality of this, said the assemblyman, and corruption drips off the walls in Albany. And he estimated that if the vaccine bill, among many others, passes, New York could see 500,000 residents move out of the state by 2021. As part of the legislation, DiPietro said that children could receive the mandated vaccines without their parents' knowledge or consent during the school day. He said that it has become a reality that a child could be kicked out of school without proper vaccinations. Now, what this is a multi-pronged plan. I've told you in past shows, plans don't do things for one reason. There's always several others. One, to put fear into the people. Two, to make people sick or die, which feeds the pharmaceutical people. Three, empty out New York. Hello, California, anyone? Four, crush the homeschooling. And five, the real hidden hand, but it's in the legislation. If the parents don't consent, they will bring in the pedo and ritual sacrifice club known as the CPS to take children off them. Now, the total cost of the vaccine is between $390 to $510 per child. And with over 3 million children in the state of New York, the venture looks set to generate considerable profits for Merck. I thought it was the same vaccine. If it's the same vaccine, why is the difference in price between 390 and 510? Plus the fact, what's in it to justify that cost? But the biggest thing about this is, where are the memes for fascism? This behaviour is of a fascist dictatorship. And please ignore the connections to Germany or whites. Fascism was created by Zionists, not Germans. Where is the media, alt or otherwise, outcry? Let's put this into clear and understandable perspective. They are forcing your child to inject known poisons into their body against the child and their parents' wishes. That is outright fascism. I remember arguing with Americans 12 years ago about the Fourth Reich. And the gist was, we are Americans and we won't fall for that like the Germans. Really? Hello, wake up and smell the fascism. It's all around you. While people focus on the famous tailgating parties, ball games, you have psychopaths with material gain making policies in Gotham. Coming soon, forced chips under the skin. Don't believe me? Tell that to the smokers who are banned from all public places. Tell that to the parents being forced at the risk of child kidnapping to do something they don't wish for their children. Again, it's New York. And at which point do the populace here wake up and realise this is the most corrupted, demonic cesspit on this planet and do something about it? Home of the Federal Reserve, harvesting machine. The UN, another harvesting machine. Wall Street, harvesting machine. Jewish, Italian and Irish mafias. Harvesters again. Ellis Island, Montauk, Long Island, Manhattan. Not to mention the streets filled with litter and filth of gangs, drugs and forced prostitution, and the birthplace of Born In and Born To. That is mentioned so many times in connection to criminality and heinous practice, it's just not funny anymore. The Americans want walls on the southern border, which is beneficial, and yet miss the giant elephants in the room in this country. The enemy is largely within, and no, it's largely not DC, as the alt media and the mainstream media would have you believe. We need walls around New York and Langley, Virginia, and the whole area's cleansed out, and you will literally solve 80% of this country's issues, and that figure may even be low. We'll be back. Hi all and welcome back as we continue our journey through December. And the rumour again was that the UK Queen is abdicating in a couple of months. Now, whilst under normal circumstances this will be a good thing, except those waiting in the wings to replace her are 1,000 times worse. And they're trying to get her to sign off on all kinds of things in favour of the old system. To date, she has resisted all attempts. She's a sovereign, you see, like Kim. So she can sign off on certain deals, and she won't do that. The Russian top brass got tired of waiting for the false promises and finally no longer believe the Rothschilds and the RV. And they have told the Rothschilds their business was no longer welcome in Russia. The group spoken of in the alt media called the Alliance, and how they're fighting the cabal, is pure folly as this piece from Kim will allay to. The alliance spoken about taking out the cabal are two opponents in the highest stakes game of chess. The alliance is the House of the Black Sun, modelled after Hitler's alliance, which was their creation, along with the Thule Society, the Nazi Party again, was their creation. They are attempting a hostile takeover for free of the whole banking system using their arms and legs within the military and the agencies worldwide. These same people also run the Order of the Assassins, which is mostly called the Islamic Caliphate, where Obama hails from, better known as Muslim Brotherhood or Langley 3. Both Rothschilds and the Black Sun consider each other an enemy. However, on this level, they are chosen opponents from the days of old from Marduk. Neither one will achieve their objective, as they were never meant to. It's the repeated old program of boogeyman and saviour again. Marduk's objective is to get them to fight each other to keep planetary martial law and the ownership of the souls to the Destroyer, which was a much more lethal force than the Draco ever were. As Kim said, the only way to win the game is to not play. So is the alliance fighting the cabal? No, they are fighting against the Rothschilds to install the Black Sun Empire. Duped. They too have a banking arm called the Black Bankers, who have inserted themselves everywhere and work against the Rothschilds. Both are evil, and the depopulation plan is run by the Black Sun, although Rothschilds also has one as well. And this is two covens battling for world domination. It seems the clowns are on the same level as the copy and paste Voyeurs group, as several meetings have taken place early December between people and Kim. Except it wasn't Kim. There are Kim duplicates running around trying to do deals on behalf of Kim, and yet again, yes, it's more CIA-based fun and games. The people who think they've met Kim in Africa, that is not and never was the real Kim. Sorry. The Fed tried to cash in on emergency funding for the repo market on a Tuesday in December, and then realised no such fund exists. Oh my. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Why, oh why at this stage do they keep trying money plot after money plot and keep getting the same result, which is failed, is completely beyond normal and rational understanding. And it's just anything to stay in the illusion of control. They own nothing now except illusion. The crown has gone. The Rothschilds going or gone. In-ground resources gone. Illuminati gone. The Fed gone. UN rendered pathetic by dragging a 16-year-old truant child to deliver their deluded messages. I could go on, but you get the gist. Subsequently now another panic has set in and the word is spreading fast around the banks, which it has, culminating in today. In 1960, the birth rate average globally was 5 children, not per family, but per woman. 2.5 per woman. By 2017, it was down to 2.4 globally, a drop of over 50% in live births. In 1960, the global population was 3 billion, and they're now saying it's 7.5 billion. So according to their Common Core statistics, every woman in the world is having just over 50% less children since 1960, and yet the world's population has increased at the same time period by 150%. 4.5 billion increase. Does that make any sense? Methinks the world is populated by bots, synths and clones. Or they lie about the population rate, or both. An interesting chat developed on the page on MeWe in the middle of December based on a headline that Catholics believe they must drink blood to maintain eternal life. And this is down to the Catholic Mass, where they tell you you are drinking the blood and eating the flesh of Christ. Oh dear. And people dismiss it as not literal, but do it anyway, as it appears official man or woman must always be right in what they're telling you. The same applies to a cop or a doctor or a lawyer, a judge, nurse or politician. We have this mind-wiped thinking that they know best for us or better than us. Yet when you ask them questions, they don't have a clue about their own jobs, never mind anybody else's. And the reality is, no, they don't know what's best for us. Because if they did, this world would have been ran much better than it is. So, Catholic will cite those words are being taken too literally by critics of the church. And it's a valid debate they put forth. Some would go further and say that the church would never do that. They are messengers of God. But anyone can put on a cloak and wear a fish hat. That does not mean to say that they're messengers of God. You just assumed they were. Big difference. Where are their credentials or proof they are men or messengers of God? There is none is why. But nobody or too few asks these questions, and that is how they get away with it. The real issue with these words, whilst not literal, the real issue is memetics and implied consent, because those words are spellcasts. Like most of the scriptures. Why would such a so-called holy book contain such words to begin with? Throw in death, rape, incest, plagues, pestilence and slaughter, and it looks more like a Hollywood movie script to me than a holy book. Holy book may be the correct term, as once people ask critical questions of it, the whole narrative falls apart like a Swiss cheese. People are losing friends, loved ones, either by death or falling out. People are losing jobs, homes, are a very regular occurrence now in all our lives. And it brings great pain, sadness, and it can send you spinning out of balance if careful self-observance is not adhered to. Back in May of 2015, while still on Cosmic Voice, I started giving out some future warnings for listeners to absorb. It was a chance for the listeners to get ahead of the game. But like most predictions, people tend to ignore them till a much later date. A case of leave everything that is essential until the last minute. But some did take it on board. And now there were several predictions that year, as I warned shadow and inner work was essential in the coming period of time, which is now. You had to get the self ready for what was to come, and this was not a selfish act, as it actually helps others in your circle whilst you're doing it. Given we had the much later warning of we are processing and dealing with several previous generations of our ancestors at the same time, the value of that work cannot be garnered by or priced by money. It's cathartic work, the great purging of the self, of all the traumas, shame, guilt, tragedies, abuse of this and previous lifetimes. And I went on to state then the next few years would get ugly as this process was underway. And people may ask, why would it get ugly? And the reason is people hold on to negative frequencies far longer than their positive frequencies or experiences. People passing judgments to and fro where none are or were required. People talking in riddles and doublespeak. Reactionary snap judgment comments and statements will all come to the fore. Reactions out of context and not conducive to the interactions are all signs of inner turmoil, and a clear sign of those who have far more work to do than they perceive to be the case. Later that year, I hinted on the two worlds, pushed out as a theory to get people to think. Whilst being aware of it myself, it was not a theory at all. It was an event of sorts about to unfold on a larger scale. A separation of sorts, whilst also being a merging of the two worlds for people to see. And this puzzled many at the beginning, but then it began to unfold, and people began to see it on many levels. It was not just a sight event, it was a frequency-based event. In essence, another purging of sorts. Like the shadow and inner work, it began to sort out those who wanted to progress in and of themselves and the ones content to let things slide. It followed quickly with our piece about the masks of illusion. Each and every one of us has worn with cunning and vehement protection. The masks present a fake version of ourselves as we judge ourselves far too harshly and think others do it to us also. From overview, it looks a ridiculous concept. Why are we all judging each other? In most cases, harshly. Competing with each other on almost every conceivable piece of matter. Whereby what ensues then is we all wear thicker and thicker masks to cover up our perceived weaknesses or lack thereof. Insecurity in and of your own vessel is a most damaging aspect of humanity that leads to inferiority complex, Stockholm syndrome, limitation programs, unbalanced egos, dissociative identity disorder, which used to be known as multiple personality disorder, which largely got people sent to mental institutions. And yet aren't the masks we wear playing the role of a split personality? With the majority of people were presenting themselves as is and was fake, largely enhanced by the ultimate in fakery, the so-called famous people of the movies, screens, music and sports stadiums. None of those people operate in reality land. They were created and crafted into a program of no escape. Well, there was an escape, but it never ended well for them. People acted like they were rich. Yes, they were rich via the credit card debt system, which is essentially what created the modern day middle class. That was an illusion. You were middle class by debt only in most cases. People exhibited bravado and external strengths via the now well-meaned six-pack, and yet were weak internally, frightened of their own shadows, traumas, and lack of internal fortitude, and all too content to put on a front to the public, yet destroying themselves internally. We lie to ourselves in this mode consistently, but does anyone stop to think of the sheer stupidity of doing that? There's enough lies externally without adding it internally. But again, most of those lies are due to cover up the shortfalls within ourselves, and the masks were worn tightly on all people. But you were warned they would be fallen 3 to 4 years ago. They did, and they have. And the consequences of that is ugly. Watching so many people change character, and realizing too few were as nice as they portrayed themselves to be. It was all false. Many people who won't face their own shadows are now being forced into doing so, when they could have took the opportunity to do it at their own pace. Now they have no choice. So all had the opportunity to get ahead of that, in THI in particular. Many did, and some did not. They are now having their own issues displayed publicly for all to see. The shadow aspects of the self have to be integrated to become you, but you have to process it or it will repeat in this current time space. There's no hiding anymore. Despite people's ridiculous attempts to convince themselves otherwise, out will come the envy, bitterness, anger, selfish, greedy. The comparative mindset will go into overdrive as they flail about trying to justify and lessen their own actions. Their lies will be replaced by other lies in the vain attempt to keep their own illusions going. It won't work. And it will become a source of amusement and frustration to those who have done their work. Spiritual-based envy will rise exponentially as the ones who did their work shine and stand out like beacons. Those that have done their work have to work hard to protect that work and themselves. You will and have been tested, and you will be tested again severely in this coming phase. Do not feel guilty for others not waking up. Do not feel guilty for those who haven't done their shadow and inner work. They had just the same opportunity as you. You took it. They never. The world is now entering an increased phase where stupidity and rage will be even more prevalent. Hold your ground. Do not let those throw you off track. The Weight Club, which is a spell class, have waited too long for others to do things for them. Like I said in November 2017, it's too late for them to catch up. Many didn't like that statement. I didn't either. The speed at which events are now taking place, and since then, few can argue with it now. No matter how sad it is, they had the same opportunity as you. They chose to ignore it. Unlike several other things in this world where we are denied certain things or access to, this was accessible by everyone. And there's zero excuses to be had in that undertaking. The gist is that soul progression is never achieved by ignoring issues. Ignoring leads to standing still at best, and on a linear timeline, that means going backwards. The insanity of doing that because you can't face the self looks even more bizarre from an overview point of view. So why did so many fall by the wayside, lives drifting away? Because humanity became lazy. More in terms of mindset than physical, although that is diminishing by the day with the people having a penchant for technology, which ultimately leads to that technology replacing them. Many won't believe that statement, and that's fine. But I promise you it will not change the inevitable as so many sleepwalk into transhumanism. Until it happens and then people complain, who allowed this, they will cry. You did, is the answer. Lazy minds are not conducive to soul development. Lazy people who insist everyone else must do things to improve their lives is not conducive also. And the same applies to shadow and inner work. Only you can do it, as only you knows what your shadows and traumas are. My other prediction back in 2015 and 2020 vision is now here. People will see more. And no, I don't mean we will all have better eyesight. Seeing is not always done with eyes. The world around us is collapsing on all levels at a record pace now. You have two choices: fear it and panic, or embrace it and prepare yourselves. The old world is leaving. This next decade will see it collapse completely, and a new one can be born. And that new world is all down to you. If you have to ask, what can I do? You are clearly not ready for the next phase. And I will repeat it again so it sinks in. That new world is all down to you. Then we had Harvey Weinstein back in court for a new bail hearing. And he emerged still free on the $1 million bail conditions he'd been under since he was first charged with sex crimes in May 2018. Almost 2 years later now. As the hearing began, prosecutors asked the judge to increase his bail to $5 million while he awaits trial, which starts this month, I think. They said Weinstein had violated his bail conditions by mishandling his electronic ankle monitor and sometimes going unaccounted for hours at a time. Now, the defense attorney, Donna Rotanou, denied it was deliberate. She blamed technical glitches like dead batteries. And went on to say it's got nothing to do with manipulation of the bracelet, really. Does she think we're all stupid? But what gets me about this piece is, does anyone not think it's odd that not one women's advocacy group is attacking Donna Rotanou for defending the indefensible? Not one. Females got raped, sexually molested and abused, and a female is fighting to get him off based on legalese bullshittery. Where are the women's rights groups attacking the rhetoric of this female or protecting the rights of the abused females? Yet again, it's cricket's time. Because the reality, those groups are not interested in females or empowerment, but money laundering charity clubs only. Where is Oprah and DeGeneres speaking out about this? Silence. What's happening? What's happening? We should have played that piece. Billionaire Ron Lauder. There we go. Back to New York again. And he is pledging $25 million to take down what he calls anti-Semitic candidates of both parties, he told the New York Times in an interview just before Christmas. And he said, although I'm a lifelong Republican, anti-Semitism knows no political party. Really? I'm going after the right as well as the left. Now, Lauder, who's the son of the late cosmetics mogul Estee and Joseph Lauder, was born in New York, born to Jewish parents. And he's also the president of the World Jewish Congress. What people don't understand is this is another coup attempt on behalf of the Zionists. Essentially, they only want candidates that are loyal to Israel. And this is America, Mr. Lauder, not some fake created country in the Middle East at the behest of psychopathic families with their fake books, fake religion, and fake history. And Mr. Lauder needs to be dealt with under the National Security Act. There's that term again. For an act of treason and subversion of American politics and elections on behalf of a foreign state. Mr. Lauder needs to learn history as well, as the majority of Jews were not Semites. Now, some may think this is not a widespread issue, but let's look at these names, shall we? The US Senate: Richard Blumenthal, Barbara Boxer, Benjamin Cardin, Dianne Feinstein, Al Franken, Herb Kohl, Frank Lautenberg, Joseph Lieberman, Carl Levine, Bernard Sanders, Charles Schumer, Ron Wyden, Michael Bennet. House of Representatives: Gary Ackerman, Shelley Barkley, Howard Berman, Eric Cantor, David Cicilline, Stephen Cohen, Susan Davis, Ted Douche, Elliot Engel, Bob Filner, Barney Frank, Gabrielle Giffords, Jane Harmon, Steve Israel, Sander Levine, Nita Lowey, Gerald Nadler, Jared Polis, Steve Rothman, Jan Schakowsky, Alison Schwartz, Adam Schiff for Brains, Brad Sherman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Henry Waxman, Anthony Weiner, John Yarmouth. All those named and more hidden have dual passports. And again, I have to ask, where is the National Security Act? You've got the portal people complaining about Russian collusion, and we have tens of people who have not only defined themselves as American, but actually operating for another country's benefit and policies, right in your face. Now, some people don't like me repeatedly saying born in and born to. Well, those people need to start listening properly to the depth of this problem, or nothing will ever change. It will just be new boss, same as the old boss in terms of policy, but in terms of intensity, it will be 10 times worse than it is now. Remember, these people, according to their book, want Armageddon, remember, and think only them will be saved. They want a global Armageddon where everybody dies. And remember, these people regard, according to their books, they regard us as non-human and animals. That they are told they can kill, rob, rape and use pedestry against any non-Jew and it's not a crime. These are the same people who recently were charging a 3-year-old Palestinian child for throwing a stone at a tank, putting him in court. He wouldn't be able to throw a stone at a tank if they were not on their historical land. There is zero evidence of that country, Israel, ever existing in history other than a fake book. Don't believe me? Fine. But go and research it yourself. There's no record of it. And if you listen to From Russia with Love, they never went to Jerusalem either. What you will find if you research for yourself is like the American pastor 3 to 5 years ago, who was passionate about the Bible, and he went to the Middle East to prove the Bible was correct, and found out to the contrary. It was all largely a lie, and he subsequently came back to America and quit as a pastor. Like I've said before, Israel is a falsely created militaristic base in the Middle East for collecting of resources and a death and destruction program, all created by the psychopathic Rothschild family and their demonic cohorts. Go and research the Balfour Declaration, 1919. Then we had the IG report, Inspector General report, lots of he said, she said, he did, she did, etc. But the FBI was being thrown under the bus. And the point missing from all the YouTubers and QAnons is they focus on what is relayed, not what's in the details. They were stating that the FBI had promised to pay the British agent Christopher Steele for dirt on Trump. That is wrong and misleading. The FBI were acting under instructions from the Black Dragon Group here and in China, along with the head of the Blue Dragon Group, Hillary Clinton. The Blue Dragon Group is UK based, which is why they used Christopher Steele. The FBI are the lowest link in the chain of skullduggery and corruption, and the YouTubers and QAnons are completely missing the point, as they're being guided into another path of distraction. Blame the FBI. Oh dear. No. So all the magician's hand remains hidden again. The real truth of the matter is this was a coup of epic proportions that we've been telling Trump now for the last 3 years, involving the Dragon groups, along with Cheney, the CIA, Mossad, GCHQ, MI5 and 6, the DOJ, the NSA and the DHS, as well as several countries and elements within the Democratic Party. It was a coup. Thankfully now Trump sees it. Then we've got news, we had news of China receiving a $26 billion bailout. No, that was false. They received $26 billion in vouchers. And when they tried to cash them in via the Falcon Trust, which is the opium-based trust, they, like the Fed and their repo market bailout, found out those trusts no longer exist. Oops. Empty, zilch, nada, no comprende. You know. The NATO meeting that took place last month, all ceremony and pomp again, an expensive attempt by NATO to get money off countries and in particular Mr. Trump. Not to fund NATO, although that is already in the Paris Climate Agreement. Essentially, that agreement is signing away your country's rights and resources. And all who signed it, including, hello, Mr. Obama, were given brown envelopes to do so. All of them. We have the proof. Now, the gist of what happened in that meeting was when leaders were asked for funds. And that what came back to us is, we don't have any funds either. Oops. The harsh reality is NATO is not interested in your country's security. This whole operation is a slush fund for the clowns and their mercenaries. Top and bottom line. Trump, for that matter, in that meeting, walked into the meeting and promptly walked out within minutes of it starting. And then we put out this message. The next portion will be a world message that must not be taken lightly. This is not a drill or a game, and it will be in 3 parts. And this next intel piece may disturb some and may put some in fear. But as the opening song on that night said, you walk on with hope in your heart and don't be afraid of the dark. There is and will be a golden sky at the end of it all. As long as we believe. Do what is right, righteous, and stand up for the all in humanity. Now, in light of our now confirmed knowledge of the various factions are now currently preparing us for World War III and our ultimate destruction, so they think. And yes, we know what they're up to. We see and hear everything. Their moves are preempted and monitored, and they will not be allowed to go ahead with their games of rank stupidity. And the message was, if you think you can just destroy the surface population and you all hide in your underground cities, we have prepared for that also. They will all be laid to waste as well on the first launch of any missile or weaponry against humanity. So that plan, like your world domination plan, will fail also. And you do realise you played the world domination plan for someone else's benefit, don't you? Oops. The one you all worshipped was taking control, not you. You were all, and I mean all of you, were to be expended. Sacrificed like pawns in a game you could not see or observe. We'll be back shortly. Right, on we go. That song, War Pigs, and you break it all down. Generals gathered in their masses. Of course, we changed it last year to Mattis before he got fired. Just like witches at black masses, evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerers of death's construction. Doesn't say white or light witches, does it? Just says witches. Black masses. In the fields, the body's burning as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning the brainwashed minds. Oh Lord, yeah. Dark magicians using death and hatred to mankind, all in the name of the Lord, who no longer exists. And they don't realise that they're all part of mankind as well. Politicians hide themselves away. They only started the war. Why should they go out to fight? They leave that to the poor. It's true. Because the majority of politicians are too stupid and brainwashed to see what's really going on. And the fact is, they are the lowest pawn on the board. In fact, in reality, they're not even on the board. Only the illusion as such. You know, the characteristics required to become a politician now is how greedy and self-serving can you be? Or how far can you go to crush the people, including their own family? That is the CV required to become a politician these days. A puppet. The song goes on, time will tell on their power minds, making war just for fun, treating people just like pawns in chess, wait till their judgment day comes. Treating people just like pawns, not realising they are people and subsequently pawns also. This is what they don't get. Now in darkness, world stops turning, ashes where the body's burning. No more war pigs have the power, hand of God has struck the hour. So the war pigs have wiped everyone out, which is what they'd like to do anyway, particularly the Jewish element. But who are they going to control then, with everybody gone? Rothschilds was right. You are jackasses. So the question remains is, what happens next, clowns? Day of judgment, God is calling, on the knees the war pigs crawling, begging mercies for their sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings. When the realities, the real God awaits you, not the fake gods you've all bowed down to and kissed their collective dark-based asses. Your day of judgment is upon you. All your decisions prior have been stupidity in its highest form, duped on a massive scale, that you all thought you were too clever or too smart to be fooled. You weren't. Why do you think they installed spyware in everybody's phone, including the so-called top leaders? Do you not ponder on that fact? You were all the enemy along with us. You know, us, the useless eaters. Like we have found out, humans are not top of the food chain, and neither were they. Then we gave a message out to all that listen in the various agencies and heads of state and governments and military and high officers. It was around that we spoke with the Rothschilds, and they confessed that the Order of the Black Sun was their enemy. In another few calls, we heard from other leading control-based groups, shall we say, of how they are enemies of the Rothschilds. And this is becoming a very common theme amongst the minions. This is the factions fighting each other, not realising the ultimate goal was to wipe them all out. You know, Shane and I mentioned that in the show going back, I think it was 2015 or 16. The plan for the top order was to wipe all the minions out. And in general terms, it could be classed as just saying what we want to hear from them. Rothschilds saying, we're enemies of the Order of the Black Sun, and there's other people saying, we're enemies of the Rothschilds, as a lure to gain access to the trust. And there are elements of that, but there is also elements of truth contained within their message. They have lost their destroyer. You've lost your king, Marduk. You've lost many of your Order of the Black Sun, 768,000 of them. You lost your Draco people back in 2015, one of which was the Lord in the Bible. Lost control of the assets you all thought belonged to you, and you're losing your wealth now heavily. And yet you all hang on to the illusion of being in control. To all the various groups, be it factions, families, royals, the fake alliance, and the SSP, agencies, mercenary groups who are basically subsidiaries of the same former Five Eyes groups, which is now No Eyes. Religious-based groups of all denominations, all of which stem from one group who are anti-humanity. All of you have been taught, look over there, that is your enemy or boogeyman, go and attack, spy, or work against them. Subsequently, your enemy was told the same thing, attack, spy, and work against you. Each group were told and or promised they would be a variant of King of the World, hello Mr. Putin, the chosen ones, several, the richest ones, the guardians of the planet and all of its treasures. We know each of you were told that. We also know it was all a big conspiracy, an illusion played by the dark magicians. This was a giant game of chess with a cosmic twist. All of your groups played the white pieces. Hidden in the middle of the chessboard and only seen by the black pieces, dark magicians, were the sub-grey pieces. But the real controllers were the black pieces. In this game, only the white pieces were allowed to move, but you could only go sideways and back, knocking each other's pieces over, whilst the hidden sub-grey pieces played you like the violinists on the Titanic, and it all went down. The black pieces never moved. They didn't have to. You did all that for them. Sadly, the human trait of ego and greed played into all of it. The desire to out-compete everybody else, but essentially you were competing against yourselves. And one step back and a review of what has taken place would render you with the same conclusion. But then we have the other human trait kick in. We can't admit we were wrong. That would make us look weak. Newsflash. All of humanity was wrong and also weak. We've all been fooled. All live a life mired in delusion and illusion. And we're all competing against each other on 99.99% of which people have no idea why they're actually doing it. All of you were actually on the same side, but you were all too blind, greedy and arrogant to see. You all thought you were the king's men and the lead ally. Wrong. The former king was a psychopathic megalomaniac who wouldn't know right from wrong if it poked him in his hidden forked tongue. All of you were treated as his peasants to collect the bounty and harvest. But when he had it all, he cut you all off. And 12 years later, heading for 13 now, you still haven't faced reality. You were all played, every last one of you. Do you understand how ridiculous that looks? It's embarrassing. But if it is only damaging you, that would be your own fault. But it's damaging us all, and your stupidity appears to have no boundaries. The game you thought you were all playing was lost. Get over it and step forward for and on behalf of humanity. The key now is, how weak can you get before you show your real strength? Which is internal fortitude, not your external bullying tactics to cover up your own weaknesses and also stupidity. Whilst you collected worthless pieces of paper, he collected the real assets, including you and your own souls. You all sold them out via your own delusions and greed. And the question remains now is, do you want them back? Karma is a bitch, and payback will be harsh. Your magic you have used to cheat, lie and steal is diminishing as quickly as your control. Do you want payback some of your karma and come and help humanity rebuild, or suffer even more dire consequences than just being fooled? Choose wisely, as time, as they call it, is very short. You may fool yourselves, but humanity after this message should not and will not be fooled again. A final message that night was a message to you all. There is a solution and a solution. But you have to step down from your fake positions of importance, your badges of death, your delusions of control and being in control. Come to us as equals, and we can all play a role in charting a path that benefits the all, not just a few. You will all need to be taught again what is real and what is not, just the same as we had to. That is not a weakness, it is actually a strength. We have a lot of the answers you all desire, but we cannot and will not choose for you all. We are not a dictatorship. We are just here to guide. We need all of your input to guide this planet onto its rightful path of soul evolution and human development, where we can find ways to improve lives, not weaponize things against them. The trust holds all of the assets despite your frequent denials, and all of it will stay locked inside the system until sanity prevails, which despite your several attempts to hack it, they all failed. Why? Because your intentions are wrong. You are hacking to keep the illusion of control only, and like your Carrot for Jackasses program called the RV, that will always fail also. The trust belongs to everyone on this planet. Your people and others have already looted much to fulfill your desires of world domination. That failed also, as M took everything from you. We wish to give everything back to everyone. It is where it belongs. No one controlling anyone. We are all sovereigns. Those of you who deem yourselves as the power structure have an opportunity to fly straight, an opportunity to learn the real truth that has gone on this planet for a very long time. It will not be pleasant hearing, of that we can guarantee. But it's essential learning for what is to come, regardless of your futile efforts. With that, we are requesting you arrange an emergency UN meeting. This will be a global emergency and of ultimate importance to this planet, which we request is also televised globally so that all can hear it. We request that you ensure our safety in attending, and we will chart a path together, the way forward for all of humanity with the trustee and the team. Do you have the moral fortitude to do so? And are you? I'm also calling on the Council, including the Air Council and the UPU, to make this happen. Then we heard of more atrocities and sacrifice in the land of the alleged spiritual-based East, this time in Nepal, Bara district. Animal Equalities team on the ground in Nepal have obtained drone images showing the devastating aftermath of this week's religious killings at the Gadhimai festival, which is the largest animal sacrifice in the world. Thousands of buffalo were massacred in just one day, and over the last few hours in this report, Animal Equalities team also documented sexual abuse of some of the animals in the temple. Animals brutally slaughtered with machetes and knives, animals transported to the temple in unsafe and unhygienic conditions, animals hung upside down on bicycles, emaciated animals without enough food or water, calves who froze to death while waiting slaughter. This is the Kali Ma worshipping in action and right in your face. And why are the Indian people going along with this barbaric practices and stupidity for their fake gods, who have never done anything of any benefit for them? And what's more, they're never going to either. The fake saviour program runs rampant through all cultures on this planet, and not one of them has ever worked. With a lot of newsworthy events of the middle of December taken off everywhere to distract attention, I kind of rolled my eyes at the incident that week. At first in New Jersey. It's the same script over and over again, yet so many blindly follow it. Now, some on the internet will say, great, it was only Jews, largely because they're ignorant and not necessarily racist, but pure, unadulterated ignorance. And when they adapt their few brain cells and understand that all lives matter, then those people can have an opinion. Until then, they all sound like idiots. Of course, we all know where their opinions come from. The anti-human, treasonous media. The media were pushing anti-Semitism attack again, and it becomes tiresome and repetitive and a part of the now 70-plus year guilt trip that doesn't do anyone any good. It's reliving trauma-based events that serves no one, and that continuing looping back in time serves only to re-traumatise those events. That is certainly not helping the people who are involved in that timeline or their descendants, and quite frankly only serves those wishing to gain from it, which is not the average Jewish person. The press gave out two names, but the New York media identified them as David Anderson and Francine Graham. And sources told the NBC that Anderson was a follower of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, whose believers say they are the true descendants of the ancient Israelites. Oh dear. So please explain to me how killing Jews is anti-Semitism. And so who are these people? They're also known as Black Hebrews, African Hebrew Israelites and Hebrew Israelites. Now, the movement consists of diverse groups called camps of people mostly of black African ancestry. And the primary doctrine they have in common is that they believe that they are the descendants of the ancient Israelites. Now, most followers themselves use the term Hebrew Israelites, since the movement also includes Latino members, although the latter have lesser standing. Black Hebrews adhere in varying degrees to the religious beliefs and practices of mainstream Judaism, but are not accepted as Jews by the Jewish community. Oh my. God's chosen people have a caste system. Wonder where that came from. Many black Hebrews consider themselves, and not mainstream Jews, to be the only authentic descendants of ancient Israelites. So there you have it. Hebrews killing Hebrews, which is not what was portrayed in the media, because that doesn't fit the media spin machine is why. And this has gone beyond a joke now, and the damage it's doing to the Jewish people is enormous. More Jewish people got killed this week. Some more attack. Because people are turning their ire onto the Jewish people because of these clowns operating as Jews that are Zionists. Their whole existence based on some fake books aeons ago, which is an anti-human book, make no mistake about that. A book that treats over 98% of the world's populace as pieces of shit under their shoe and have no value is not something conducive to the harmony of all peoples. And as has been found out, not conducive to the Jewish people either. The Zionist element, as From Russia with Love covered, has done largely untold and catastrophic damage to the world's populace, and they roll on largely unhindered because they are setting the rules of engagement, like you can't question the 6 million or the Holocaust. Do people stop and think of that and wonder why the contradictory nature of that ruling? On the one hand, you can't discuss what happened to the Jews, and on the other hand, you have it rammed down your throat at an increasing level in movies, newspapers, songs, TV shows, literature, and the media. It's a case of copy and repeat again, isn't it? Just listen to what we are telling you, but never question it. Well, the truth never fears investigation. These black Hebrew Israelites are again the Kali Ma worshippers, migrated out of India, which is why they have a caste system, and eventually into America and mixed with the indigenous tribes, and this is how and why Native Americans obtained the name Indians. These are the sub-grey race mix of people we covered in From Russia with Love series. And anyone declaring themselves the 12 or 13 tribes of Israel is neglecting what that group stands for. Sacrifice and genocide that goes back tens of thousands of years. And this is not the badge of honour on a human level so many ascribe to. What is the future? Everything that's in front of you. As you walk forward, you are heading into the future. Look behind or walk backwards. It is the past. Standing still is not the now either, as you are always in motion. Motion is time and space. And yet it can be argued it's neither also. So you are always moving. You just don't perceive it that way. Let the past go. It serves us no purpose now. Too much has been dealt with, too much has been exposed now, and it's time to be with the vision of going forward than going into the past. That past provides insights to protect and envision our future, but it needs not to be a tool to mire ourselves down with. By going back to try to change the past and subsequently to alter the future, this was our biggest mistake. We have to observe the past from a place of neutral, not active or reactive. Assess it, develop hindsight, bring it to the now for assessment, learn the lessons and release it. Then go forward from the here and now to create the future, not the past. The past is not in the future. We are going out of the loops. And that is why it's your role to clear your bloodline, so they are not burdened in the next phase. For many, the slate needed to be cleaned, not by reset, but by hard work and endeavour. And in a completely separate analogy to the elevator piece, the saying, what goes up must come down, but what comes down has a missing space-time currently. And this can be tested by yourself. You will see, or as the case may be, you won't see it briefly. Back on. We've done a news piece about Express Scripts, and they made a point in their wiki page saying scripts was short for prescriptions, which I thought was an odd addition to the narrative, so I checked the origin of scripts, or could it be scripts, which means written paper, credit note, IOU, deed, bond, and also to cut, separate, or sift. So prescription is another bond, another credit note or an IOU, and the deed or title is to your body. So it's a possession spell cast, which they cut, separate, and then sift, which is wheat and chaff terminology. Still want to be using their prescriptions? It was related to AI and data mining. And we said, welcome to the world of increased data mining. This is with the health service, that's I remember now. Via AI. Brought to you by Palo Alto, Go Ogle, Microsoft, IBM, or I was M, all of whom are subsidiaries of the NSA and CIA, along with other clowns in America agents and his NATO-based open-source public spying system, Robert David Steele. Listen to the clowns in Panic Show again for a wider understanding of that. So the delay, the inevitable process is now underway, more commonly known as the impeachment of the president, which is rubbish, which will be delayed and delayed again before going to Senate in an attempt to change the outcome of what is going on behind the scenes. Either way, it won't work, but stupid is as stupid does. Now, what the public don't know is, behind the scenes, on a separate level, the Dark Minions plot and scheme at the same levels of repeat and repeat they've done previously, and yet too few see through the illusion. Even the ones with an IQ of 140 as an entry point. Yes, you, Langley. Bribery and the promise of riches is being brought forth now to all politicians, ranging from $1.5 million to $10 million, depending on the person, to vote against Donald Trump at the impeachment hearing. Newsflash for those willing or open to that: we will know if you have fallen for that tactic. There is no place to hide now, and 2, you will never get paid, ever. You'll be told you have to vote first and then you get paid. And like all the other clowns and the contractors and the RV crew people and the generals with their pallets of zims, dings and dungs and dongs, you're never going to get paid. Now, Mike Pence, who has been working with Pelosi, the Clintons and Cheney, has been promised funds and the presidency. And the same applies to you, Mr. Pence. We see everything. And you will be thrown to the wolves because it's not you they want as the president. That's the seducement. It's the third in line and Speaker of the House, Nancy Incoherent Pelosi. They need Trump out of the way as Pence or Pelosi in charge. They plan on transferring all of America's in-ground resources to China. Nice people. Just like Hillary had done until she lost the one-horse race. Bribery, sedition and treason. I believe you have a code for that, Mr. Trump. Use it indiscriminately as time to scatter the 4 horsemen to the wind, was the message in that show. And then it came out just after it did it now. This was a fairly long piece, and I think it covers to the end of the show. That was originally meant for Alan's show. But Alan soldiered on despite the flu and time ran out. So here's a fuller, more detailed piece of looking at the world of religion, spiritual-based groups and hidden cults, which we covered heavily in the From Russia with Love series. And then we started with the Catholics. Let's look at them closely, shall we? They have or had large amounts of wealth, whilst many of their followers struggled. Yet it was the church and their assassin crew, known as the Knights Templar, who created the first bank and usury interest, which was stationed along the trade routes, and they took gold and silver, which is the only real form of money, and gave people pieces of paper. What they did then is they raided the towns where the people who were trading came from and killed lots of people. So those that never returned for their gold and silver, they then claimed the gold and silver of the people they had killed. And the funds went to the church. The church are also involved extensively in pedophilia. It's no longer a conspiracy. They're involved in child trafficking via the Vatican Bank, looting via the Vatican Bank. They created the mafia as a money laundering operation. They created the P2 Lodge, which is another of the former Five Eyes crew who take part in assassinating people, which we covered in From Russia with Love 7. Overthrowing countries, killing the people and stealing their resources, the funds of which went back to the church. They partake in ritual sacrifice below the Vatican, initiated the Dutch-led, not British-led destruction of Ireland via the Battle of the Boyne, created the divide between the Irish people. And yes, they can argue that was the Protestants, the Church of England and the Queen, but Protestants is a Catholic religion in disguise. The original Protestants were Catholics who were protesting against the crimes and corruption of the Church. The Church of England is also run by the Vatican. Took part in several heinous crimes within Ireland and several other places involving children, sexual abuse, trading, torture and death. Forced in a problem, reaction, solution tactic, thousands of Irish people onto boats and over onto the next conquest of land, America. In appalling conditions, many of which became slaves. His story says they were fleeing religious persecution. But once they had split the Catholic religion and created Protestants so they can fight each other, they then set up the next stage and how the Pilgrims were fleeing the nasty Brits and moving towards favouring the more nice Dutch version. Out of the frying pan into the fryer springs to mind, and another problem, reaction, solution achieved, along with the fake enemies Catholic and Protestant program launched based on false history that they gave to the people, and the classic boogeyman saviour program. The message to Catholics: Protestants are not your enemies. Protestants, Catholics are not your enemies. It is and always was the Church. The Pilgrims were not fleeing the England Church and state, but were being corralled by the Zionist-led Dutch movement. Christopher Columbus, who to this day we are told founded America. Why was it lost? Did he rise the whole continent out of the water like a turtle? He didn't find it at all. It was the next stage of the Roman Empire under the auspices of the Hebrewic Kalima movement. Columbus was also funded for that journey by the Vatican. They set up fake charities like the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, and Mother Teresa. Most of the funds were or are funneled back to the church, and no, Mother Teresa was not nice. Research for yourself. The Catholic Church went about during the 1500s and 1700s and possibly beyond, setting fire to the whole of Europe, all the major cities. That is something that's not that well known. To destroy the history of Europe and its peoples, and set the stage for the next. The Vatican Church was also the holder of all the birth certificates and bonded us to them as chattel, then leveraged vast funds against those bonds called stocks. Stocks are a binding term. And then looted our personal funds at age 7 when we were declared lost at sea, as in Holy See. They burned several people alive during the alleged witches phase, but these people were exposing the church. The church is also representative by a negative ET race with the fish hats, the Dogons, and worships the even more negative race of ETs, the serpents. Go and check out the roof of the auditorium in the Vatican and check out the floor-to-ceiling bronze statue that they state is Jesus rising out of the nuclear ashes. How? When allegedly nuclear bombs were started in the 1940s. In fact, that statue is not Jesus at all. It is a reptilian and part of the serpent race that the Vatican Church all bow down to. They burnt alive one of Source's teachers, Anna, in the 1500s. They hunted down and murdered Mary Magdalene and one of her children. They hunted down and killed the real Jesus, Radomir. They changed the Easter festival from Ostara to Easter to disguise their pagan-based deities. They wrote a story about the winter solstice into an Easter narrative, changed the sun S-U-N into sun S-O-N. And on December the 21st, the shortest day and the winter solstice, the sun goes down below the horizon for the next 3 days. Behind the sun in the night sky is the constellation called the Southern Cross. So the sun dips below the horizon for 3 days, so the sun died for 3 days on the cross. On December the 25th, the sun rises above the horizon and is reborn. So the sun died for 3 days, which is the 3 days of darkness, and then was reborn and went into the heavens. Sound familiar? The Vatican Church created all of your holidays, which is holy days. All are pagan, ritual, sacrifice, human days to their fake gods. All of them. They were active in World War II in undercover missions to destroy many people, particularly of Aryan descent. Check out the From Russia with Love series for more details on that. They were in league with the CIA. Your recent popes. One was a gun runner for the junta in South America, one sold cyanide to the Nazis, and another one was an SS officer. Oops. And no, Nazis are not Germans by and large. They were Zionist, Kali Mars, or the sub-grey race. They burned books of anything that went against the narrative of the church. But the burning was a ceremony only. They removed the vital books prior and stored them in the now Vatican Library and also under the house in Malta. Galileo, Da Vinci and Copernicus were victims of their oppression. Protected by the Knights of Malta, another thug-based assassin group connected to the church, who the IRA people Jerry Adams is connected to. He's Knights of Malta. Oops. It was they who destroyed France with their Zionist-based Franks and Merovingians, and they who worshipped the cat, which is the cult of Ra, whose only purpose was to take over this planet and the destruction of all humans. And that's why they're called Catholics. And yet people go to these Catholic churches for so-called spiritual or God-based for morality, well-being, a sense of servitude to their God. I'm sorry, but you're fooled big time. All religions and spiritual-based practices connected to religion are all fake. And an external seeking of a fake God when the real God source is already inside of you, just waiting for you to tap into it. All these messiahs and gods were all fake in every religion or spiritual-based practices. Messiahs are 10 a penny and basically ego-based airheads, declaring themselves above all others. No one is above anybody else, and I mean no one. A real Messiah or God would not announce it. They would be here to do a duty and to help humanity, not stand around in crowds demanding servitude, sacrifices, and all bow down to the Great One. That is ego. The real source would never ask that of you, ever. As for all the offshoots like Baptist, Methodist, Puritan, Episcopal, Evangelical, Lutheran, etc., they're all offshoots of the same church, no matter which way you mask it. Divide and conquer was the main tactic. Then throw in the problem, reaction, and they provide us with the solution they wanted, not what we wanted. Mormons, another but more direct version of the cult of Ra. Like the Vatican, has vast amounts of wealth, stolen under false pretenses and sometimes using violence-based threats to and from their followers. A fake religion based on some fake Egyptian plates that no one other than the alleged creator and the writer of their manifesto ever saw. Egyptian symbolism everywhere. Their main centre is called a temple. All temples are ritual sacrifice centres for humans and animals. All of them. Heavily involved in pederasty, pedophilia, a fear-based cult that demands 10 to 20% of your earnings or else you lose your job, contract or worse. A hedonistic and tantric-based cult that involves a sexual free-for-all involving pedophilia, incest and wife-swapping. And from an overview, that is an energy harvesting tactic, but it also has the propensity to spiritually degrade your vessel due to having several sexual-based cords connected to you via the sex act. More so if it involves buggery. Let me just check that. I'm still on. Can everyone still hear it okay? There's something just bleeped off quickly from MeWe. Yep. Right, on we go. Africa relies on varying ET-based cultures like the Dogon, who are predominant there, plus European-based messiahs for the varying religions like the Rabbi Zavai and other fake self-created messiahs like Oscar Ernst Bernhardt, under the pen name Abderushin and his Grail message doctrine. They come under misdirection and ego-based practices. And then you have the Zionist sub-grey element again in Ethiopia and neighbouring countries. They have oppressed into following their cult-based religion. Then we have the Mecca. Based on the Sirius star system technology that harvests the energy of all the people who pray to it several times a day. And as for the festival, oh dear. It's like the Maypole Festival, all swirl around the pole in a retrograde motion, creating a vortex for the harvesting of your energy. Enlightenment, my ass. Now, for evidence of how easy it is within a culture to create false gods, look no further than the Pacific Islands. For decades, their gods were the US military of all people, who dropped supplies for their soul dyers in readiness for the next ritual sacrifice of humans called World War II. The natives saw them as the return of the gods in their fiery chariots and built replica planes long after the military left, hoping for the return of the gods and the supplies they dropped from the air. That's how easy it is. As for East and spiritual-based practices, we have covered recently rampant corruption. The Dalai Lama is a CIA agent. Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, chanting mantras, mandalas, Shiva, Vishnu, and other deities of that region are all fake. A massive loosh fest harvesting involving tantric, siddhis, and other so-called spiritual-based practices, and again a heavy use of messiah complex, using threats and intimidation, which was covered in the show. Again, the use of sexual-based coercion by the lamas, and some of the most barbaric ritual sacrifices the planet over. That involves mass human and animal sacrifices, including evidence of bestiality with the animals inside the temples. Like I said, all temples supposedly places of worship, and yet it's achieving its main goal of harvesting your energy and is a sacrifice center. It always was and still is. This culture also denigrates, abuses, and treats women as sex objects, as we covered in another show. That women are things to abuse and second-class citizens, just like the African and Middle Eastern cultures. India alone sacrifices 7,000 of their people per day. Where are all the morally superior, enlightened spiritualists stopping this carnage? Nowhere is what? Because their fake God said it was okay. Wrong. The only thing that needs sacrificing is these fake gods, fake angels, ark or otherwise, and fake messiahs in all cultures, because then what is left is just you and source, the way life was meant to be. India, Tibet, and China with their spiritual-based practices, add in America and their let's all sing Kumbaya, love and light, and all will be well. Does anyone not ask why so many in those 4 countries alone are suffering, dying, being sacrificed, like the 900,000 children per year in America alone? Yes, you heard that right. That is starving, homeless, and crime. If all these practices were righteous and the real world would be a much better place, would it not? But the fact is, once you snap out of your zombified amnesia, is the world is not a better place. If these practices all worked, the world would be a better place. It's not. 80% of the planet or more are involved in some form of religion or spiritual practices that allegedly teaches you all kinds of nice things, and yet the planet is divided, violent, chaotic, and the worst aspect, non-caring. Which God teaches you that? There is zero evidence it produces what it says it does. None. And yet the evidence of darkness is all around you. And that program encompasses everything and subsequently darkens everything. There is a common trait throughout the alt media, and in particular Stephen Greer and the ancient alien sellout crew, that these gods or ETs all came for our development. They gave us various technologies and understanding, and yes, that did take place. but all under contract, of which humans were oblivious to. It was a seducement, just like the Draco did 16,500 years ago. It was all very nice initially. Then the mirror was moved sideways and the illusion was no more. Just like religions, they have harvested, consumed, loosed, traded, trafficked and enslaved us. Has anyone considered that perhaps religion and ETs are based on the same principles and practices? Think about that closely. The answer, if you research for yourself, is yes, they are one and the same, and humans have been duped on a massive scale, doing untold damage. So which group is the prominent or predominant in all religions? In fact, all religion stems from and were created by one group. That goes by several names: Torah, Talmud are the books, both of which think humans are expendable slaves, with the most heinous writing, directives and acts ever on this planet. They go by Hebrews, Israelites, Jesuits, Jews, Sub-Grey, Zionists, Kalimar, Cult of Ra, Anunnaki and Anunnaki Zionists, all of which come under the Order of the Black Sun, who worship evil and death. And people want to go to their churches and temples. With the knowledge, all who go to their churches, temples and places of worship are participating, consenting to and condoning their evil practices. There are no ifs or buts. Your inner weakness has allowed you to be duped and harvested. Your focus on the external and ignoring the internal strengths, abilities and source has allowed these hideous practices to go on for far too long. You are their battery, their life force energy. Without you participating, none of this would exist. You go to pray, P-R-A-Y, but you are actually their prey, P-R-E-Y. Understand it now? Some will say, but Thomas, my church is not like that. And I've heard this. It is. It's part of the system. But the church does good things, they'll say. And one member said that to me. None thinking again. The people in the church did good things, not the actual building or the movement. You did the good things. Stop externalizing it. It was you who did the good things, not the church. One, God never wrote a book. 2, Jesus never wrote a book. 3, Muhammad never wrote a book. 4, deities never wrote a book. 5, Yahweh never wrote a book. 6, Lucifer never wrote a book. 7, Satan never wrote a book. The only ones who wrote books were disciples of the dark forces and evil, and ultimately faceless men. Hi all, and welcome back to the final part of tonight's part 4. Worship, or is it worship? Described as a condition of being worthy, which is subservient for the start. defined as worthy because you follow the God who demands to be worshipped or idolized. Idol means image of a deity as an object of pagan worship. But an image is not real. It's only a copy. The difference is source thinks you're all worthy. Fake gods think only they are. So war, W-O-R, is reference to worthy. Then you add the D and it becomes the word. Add the M and it becomes the worm. The original definition of worm was serpent, snake, dragon and reptile. Is the D or M added to the word, the Draco and Marduk? Perhaps this line has a different meaning now or makes sense. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Oops. And it's a reference where ship to the vessel again, maritime law, or maritime to be precise. And no, Mary is not Mary Magdalene either. Mary is another one of their fake goddesses of doom and death. And then you got the picture of Virgin Mary or Mary, which derives from French and the term marionnette, which means a puppet worked by strings. So the Virgin Mary is a puppet. But who was pulling the strings? Mumbo jumbo is a term used by Drakey Cakes and is often used as babble, which is kind of fitting, really. And yet this is actually an African deity. And the name of an idol worshipped by certain tribes in Africa, said to be a corruption of words in Mandingo or Mandinko. And one reconstructed version is Mama Diumbo. There is no references I could find for the word Diumbo, but one must ponder, is this the African version of the Kali Ma? Their king or deity was called Mansa Musa, which is depicted in art as having less toes than us and feet looking slightly webbed. Go and check it out for yourself. Now, Musa, it was said, was a devout Muslim, and his pilgrimage to Mecca made him well known across North Africa and the Middle East. Only one problem for that is Musa went to the Mecca in 1324 through 1325, and the term Muslim did not come into the language until 1610. Oops. Perhaps it meant he was Islamic. Well, that came after Muslim in 1747. Muhammad was 1610 also. And the Shiites, nope, that was 1725. Their history is talking a lot of Shiite to me. Operating under the House of Keter. There it is again from Russia with Love. The houses and the letter K again. As a Mansa, they had powers to dispense justice, to monopolize trade, and in particular gold, which was prominent in the region of Mali. All sounds very Solomon to me. And in almost eerily coincidental circumstances, the term Mansa is the name for 2 towns, a state, 2 temples, and the Deva deity in India. It is also the name of a Catholic diocese in Zambia. Connecting the dots again. Then we come to the word similar to Mansa of Mensa, with an E, not an A. And they are linked in African terms. But Mensa is also known as the IQ test group, which may be symbolic of the wheat and chaff, but perhaps we'll see why. Mensa is a dim southern constellation that is visible near the south celestial pole between the constellations of Hydrus and Chameleon. Hydra and Chameleon are both reptile groups, and that constellation is held to be a representation of the Table Mountain in South Africa. Now, we know the reps came through in Congo in '96, heavily. The Table Mountain is a South African icon and the only natural site on the planet to have a constellation of stars named after it. Mensa, meaning the table. So what type of table are we looking at? Well, perhaps this helps. In Roman Catholicism, Mensa means the top of the altar. Altar means a sacrificial slab for burnt offerings. To honour by burning sacrifices to the gods. Their words, not mine. The top or central slab upon which the Eucharistic elements are placed. Eucharistic elements are what? The sacrament of Holy Communion, the sacrifice of the Mass, the Lord's Supper. Oh dear. The sacrifice of the Mass and the Lord's Supper has so many connotations, none of which are pleasant on the ears or the heart. But remember, we are or we're not top of the food chain. Another word which I revoke all consent to future events being manifested by this word is abracadabra. It's spell magic. That's not surprising that it came from Hebrewic origins. Ivra kedivra, meaning I speak, therefore I create. But it also has origin in what is described as a separate culture. It's not. Aramaic. They used the word spell avad kadavra, meaning it has perished like the plague. So it's a death spell. Consecrate, the act of separating from a common to a sacred use, also means ritual dedication to God. And there's another word connected to consecrated in both German and Gothic that means consecrated and also holy. So the pi root of holy and consecrated is the word guile, which means deceit, wile, fraud, ruse, trickery, sorcery, and the old flavour again, witchcraft. Consecrate, the act of separating from a common to a sacred use. Like it said, ritual dedication to God. And from that word also comes the word inauguration, from consecrate. Perhaps the president sworn in a ceremony has more meaning now. From common to sacred use. Except they don't count the people as sacred. Now, consecrate and holy comes up again with the term to bless. The Old English Bletzian, Bledsian, Northumbrian, Bloedsian, bless, which means to consecrate by a religious rite, make holy, give thanks. From Proto-Germanic, blodison, hallow with blood, mark with blood, from blotham, which is blood. And originally it was a blood sprinkling on pagan altars. Oops. So a blessing was a sacrifice on an altar for the pagans and the church. And given it's related to blood, and how they like to mess with words, drop letters in and switch letters out, perhaps the word bless is a shortened version of bloodless, which is what happens after the ritual sacrifice. Consecrate and make holy comes up again from the Gothic Wehes, which means holy, German Weihen, consecrate, with the term victim, which meant originally the word victim meant a living creature killed or offered as a sacrifice to a deity or supernatural power, or in the performance of a religious rite, which is a binding ceremony, a rite religious observance or ceremony, which is where the term ritual comes from. Rit, R-I-T, you, all. Or in legal terms, writ, W-R-I-T, you, all. Getting the picture now? When you add the word hood, which is a soft head covering, to the word victim and priest, who are the hooded robe class, and join them together, then perhaps you will understand where all your victim and victimhood stems from. The priests. These priesthoods also operate in the courts, but known more so as judges. Privately, they are known as a high priest or high priestess, and that is the reason why they wear the robes. A public representative of the priest class is there to be feared, with their shipping docks on land. Come into the dock, replete with their Freemasonic tool called the gavel, passing judgment just like the church, hypnotizing just like the church with their spell-binding documents, which means ship of the mind. Spellcasts abound just like the church with their gospels, pronounced go spells. And in light of the word prescription used earlier, we have what is described as the placebo, said to be a blank-based pill that convinces the body to cure anyway, which it can, or a medicine given more to please than to benefit the patient, called the placebo effect. But what is the meaning of placebo? The name given to placebo is the rite of Vespers of the office of the dead, which essentially means the underworld. So called from the opening of the first antiphon, I will please the Lord in the land of the living. Oh dear. Being bound by religion, this next phase of time, will not serve you well. Placebo meaning the name given to the rite of the Vespers of the office of the dead. And that sounds all very holy to me. not. So you have survived all that, and all of you are still standing. What a triumph over adversity that is. Your goal was not to seek out a God. The object was to find yourself and realize you all have source inside of you. Congratulations to you all for getting this far. Living a lie with the majority of people in your life was stated this week in December. And yes, it's correct. You have not been you, as you have accommodated them, is the reality. The desire to fit in is a strong pull, but it is a damaging one for yourself and your soul, which requires you to be you and sovereign, not a copy and paste of others. We are the icebreakers. We went to the lowest depths on the journey of discovery, came back to the surface with samples, but society or the science of the people will not accept the evidence. And we ponder and wonder why. This can create reaction formation, but we have to be careful where our energy goes. Sometimes people ponder on their own inner work a lot. That leads to over-analysis. But over-analysis is a form of denial. To over-analyze means that you have the correct answer, but you refuse to accept it. You then go searching for an answer that you would prefer rather than accept the truth. But remember that the truth for one is not necessarily the truth for another, and that the truth has a tendency to drive you crazy just before it sets you free. Perhaps what you once thought was craziness is simply what it takes to free yourself from outdated beliefs and their systems. You cannot expect others to know what you are thinking or feeling, or to understand your moods and bouts of secrecy. You may think you are on a different wavelength entirely, which you are. You may be difficult to approach or comprehend, and this applies in vice versa also. But seeking an answer of what is wrong with people around you becomes a lesson in over-analysis and also denial. You know what is wrong with them. It's not the case of giving up on them unless they intrude upon, harvest or distract your path. It's just a case of letting them be and focusing your energy on you plus people in your same frequency and your future. You set the right frequency, they find you. But the pool is much thinner. You have to accept that, and it is a lonely path on the right-hand path, as too few make it. We described earlier the left-hand path of the letter N, where the illuminated ones are the top of the left path. But that path has no gate. And the new world order they run is one of illusion. They think they are the top of a tree. But it's the Kabbalah tree of death that they're on. They have to fall to then begin the ascent to the right-hand path and the open gate. They have no gate. And perhaps the lesson for them is in their New World Order, or NWO. Perhaps Marduk was playing words with them. I wouldn't put it past him, as he took the piss daily. And NWO means no way out. Oops. And I'll repeat again. Being bound by religiosity in this next phase of time will not serve you well. I will leave you with a few lines from a song that encompasses right from wrong, the pain of separation, the loneliness of being in a small pool, the pain of the two worlds, and the promise of 2020 and its visions. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer. Let it be. For though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer. Let it be.